Isabella Rodriguez sat alone in her father's empty office, staring at the document that would destroy her life forever. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the mahogany desk as she read the same paragraph for the fifth time. If Isabella Rodriguez remains unmarried by her 30th birthday, her entire inheritance shall be donated to charity, and Rodriguez Industries shall be sold to the highest bidder. Her birthday was in exactly 10 days. But what Isabella didn't know was that the homeless man begging outside her building was actually Dante Moreau, the phantom billionaire who had been secretly buying her father's company for 3 years and was now just one signature away from owning everything she thought belonged to her. Hello, gorgeous family. Welcome to Luxurious Obsession Stories. If you're ready for the most shocking tale of deception and love that will leave you questioning everything you believe about trust, smash that subscribe button right now. This story will grab your heart and never let go. Drop a crown emoji if you're ready for the ride of your life. Isabella's hands trembled as she set down her father's will. The leather chair where Roberto Rodriguez had sat for 30 years still smelled like his cologne, even though he'd been dead for 2 weeks. 10 days, she whispered to the empty office. 10 days to find a husband or lose everything. The irony was cruel. Her father had spent years teaching her to run Rodriguez Industries, grooming her to take over the family business he'd built from nothing. But his final act had been to make her inheritance dependent on something she'd never prioritized: marriage. Isabella stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked downtown Miami. 40 floors below, people moved like ants along the busy streets, all of them blissfully unaware that her entire world was crashing down. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, quickly wiping her eyes. Her assistant Monica entered with a stack of papers. "Miss Rodriguez, these are the documents from your father's lawyer. He said they needed your immediate attention." Isabella took the papers with a sinking heart. More legal complications, no doubt. As she flipped through the pages, one document made her stomach drop. "Monica," she said slowly, "what do you know about Moreau International? The investment firm? They're one of our newer partners. Why? According to this, they own 45% of Rodriguez Industries." Monica's eyes widened. "That's impossible. Your father would never sell that much of the company without telling you." Isabella read the document again, her mind racing. The purchases had been made gradually over 3 years through various subsidiary companies. Someone had been very carefully and quietly buying up her family's business. "Monica, I need you to schedule a meeting with Harrison Wells immediately and find out everything you can about Moreau International." "Yes, Miss Rodriguez?" "Also, your stepmother called. She wants to discuss funeral arrangements." Isabella's jaw tightened. Patricia had been circling like a vulture since Roberto's death, suddenly very interested in family business she'd never cared about before. "Tell her I'm busy." After Monica left, Isabella sank back into her father's chair. Not only did she have 10 days to find a husband, but she was apparently inheriting a company that was already half-owned by strangers. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Carmen. "Coffee? You sound like you need to talk." Isabella grabbed her purse and headed for the elevator. She needed air, perspective, and someone who would listen without judgment. 30 minutes later, Isabella sat in the corner booth of Luna's cafe, pouring out her problems to Carmen while her coffee grew cold. 10 days? Carmen said, her eyes wide. "Your father gave you 10 days to find a husband?" "Apparently he changed his will 6 months ago," Isabella said bitterly. "Right after I broke up with David. The congressman's son who turned out to be gay? That's the one. Apparently my failure to maintain a relationship convinced my father I needed extra motivation to settle down." Carmen shook her head in disbelief. "This is insane, even for rich family drama. What are you going to do?" "I have no idea. Every man I've ever dated has either been intimidated by my money or only interested in my money. Where am I supposed to find someone genuine in 10 days?" Maybe you don't need someone genuine, Carmen said thoughtfully. Isabella looked up from her coffee. What do you mean? I mean, your father's will doesn't say you have to stay married, right? Just that you have to be married by your birthday? That's right. So you need someone who will marry you quickly, no questions asked, then disappear after you've secured your inheritance. Isabella stared at her friend. You're suggesting I hire someone to marry me? I'm suggesting you think outside the box. You need a husband, not a soulmate. Find someone who needs money and make a business deal. It was insane. It was desperate. It was probably illegal. But it might be her only option. Even if I wanted to do something that crazy, Isabella said, where would I find someone? Someone who has nothing to lose, Carmen replied. Someone desperate enough to say yes to a crazy proposal from a stranger. Isabella was about to respond when movement outside the cafe window caught her eye. Across the street, a man was sitting on the sidewalk with his back against the wall of a closed shop. His clothes were wrinkled and dirty, his dark hair needed cutting, and he had a small cardboard sign in front of him that she couldn't read from this distance. But there was something about him that made Isabella look twice. Despite his circumstances, he sat with straight shoulders and alert eyes, not the defeated posture she expected from someone begging on the street. Someone like him? Carmen asked, following Isabella's gaze. Isabella watched the man for another moment. He was young, maybe early 30s, and even from across the street, she could tell he was handsome under the dirt and stubble. That's crazy, Isabella said. Crazy enough to work? Isabella continued staring at the homeless man. As she watched, a well-dressed businessman dropped a few coins near his sign without stopping. The man nodded politely and said something that looked like, "Thank you," but his dignity remained intact. He looks intelligent, Isabella said, surprising herself. And desperate enough to say yes to $50,000 for a week of acting? Isabella's heart started beating faster. It was the most insane idea she'd ever considered. But what did she have to lose? In 10 days, she'd either be married or disinherited. At least this way, she'd be taking action instead of waiting for disaster. I can't believe I'm even thinking about this, Isabella muttered. Sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures, Carmen said. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Isabella almost laughed. In 10 days, she could lose everything she'd worked for her entire life. How much worse could it get? If I do this, Isabella said slowly, I need you to research him first. Background check, criminal history, everything. Deal. But Bella? Yeah. If you're going to do this, you need to do it fast. 10 days isn't much time to plan a fake wedding. Isabella took a deep breath and stood up. Then I guess I better go introduce myself. As she walked toward the cafe door, Isabella caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. She looked terrified but determined, the same expression she'd worn the first time she'd addressed the Rodriguez Industries Board of Directors at age 25. If she could survive corporate sharks, she could handle one homeless man. The street was busy with afternoon traffic as Isabella crossed toward the man sitting against the building wall. Up close, she could see that he was even more handsome than she'd thought, with striking gray eyes and strong features that would be devastating once he was cleaned up. His cardboard sign read, "Anything helps. God bless." "Excuse me," Isabella said, stopping a few feet away from him. The man looked up, and when their eyes met, Isabella felt an unexpected jolt of electricity. His gaze was intelligent and assessing, not desperate or broken like she'd expected. "Yes, ma'am?" he said, his voice deep and smooth with a slight accent she couldn't place. This is going to sound completely crazy," Isabella began. The man tilted his head slightly, waiting for her to continue. There was something about his patient attention that made Isabella feel like she had his complete focus. "What's your name?" she asked. "Dante," he replied. Dante Moreau. Dante, I have a very unusual proposition for you. I'm listening. Isabella looked around to make sure no one was paying attention to them. How would you like to make $100,000? Dante's expression didn't change, but she saw something sharp flicker in his gray eyes. That would depend on what I'd have to do for it. Marry me. The words hung in the air between them. A car honked nearby, and someone behind them was talking loudly on their phone. But Isabella felt like the world had gone completely silent. I'm sorry, Dante said slowly. Did you just ask me to marry you? Yes, but not a real marriage, a fake one, just for 1 week. Dante studied her face for a long moment. You want to pay me $100,000 to marry you for 1 week? Yes. Why? Isabella hesitated. How could she possibly explain her situation to a stranger? It's complicated, she said finally. Family legal issues. I need to be married by a certain date, and then we can get divorced immediately. And you chose to ask a homeless man because you're the only person I've met today who doesn't know who I am or what I'm worth. Because you need money and I need a husband. And because... Isabella paused, looking into his intelligent eyes. Because you look like someone who could keep a secret. Dante was quiet for another moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. This legal issue of yours, is it dangerous? Illegal? Number, it's just family business, an inheritance situation. And after 1 week, I walk away with $100,000 and we never see each other again? Exactly. Dante stood up and Isabella was surprised by how tall he was. Even in his wrinkled clothes, he moved with a kind of fluid grace that didn't match his circumstances. 50,000 now, 50,000 after, he said. Isabella blinked. You're negotiating with me? I'm protecting my interests, Dante said with a slight smile. If this arrangement is as simple as you say, you shouldn't have any problem with paying half up front. Fine, Isabella agreed, but you'll have to clean up. I need you to look like you belong in my world. I think I can manage that. Isabella pulled a business card from her purse and wrote her personal cell phone number on the back. Meet me at this address tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We'll go get the marriage license and start planning the ceremony. Dante took the card and looked at it. Isabella Rodriguez, CEO, Rodriguez Industries. You're the Rodriguez heiress, he said. You know who I am? Everyone in Miami knows who you are. Isabella felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Then you know I can pay you what I promised. I never doubted you could pay me, Dante said. I'm more curious about why the richest woman in Miami is desperate enough to marry a homeless stranger. Like I said, it's complicated. Dante slipped the card into his pocket. All right, Isabella Rodriguez, I'll marry you. As Isabella walked back across the street to where Carmen was waiting, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made either the best decision or the worst mistake of her life. What she didn't know was that the man she had just hired to be her fake husband was actually Dante Moreau, CEO of Moreau International, the investment firm that now owned 45% of her father's company. And tomorrow morning, when she married him, he would own 51%. Dante watched Isabella disappear into the cafe across the street, then pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. Sir, came the immediate response. Phase 3 is complete, Dante said quietly. The Rodriguez heiress just proposed to me. She what? Exactly as we predicted. She's desperate enough to marry a stranger to save her inheritance. And you said yes? I said yes. Tomorrow morning, Isabella Rodriguez will marry me, thinking she's hiring a homeless man to solve her problems. And after tomorrow? Dante looked up at the gleaming Rodriguez Industries building where Isabella worked, thinking about the beautiful, desperate woman who had no idea what she'd just walked into. After tomorrow, he said, Rodriguez Industries belongs to me. What about the girl? Dante was quiet for a moment. Isabella's face flashed in his mind. The vulnerability in her brown eyes, the way she'd tried to look confident while proposing to a stranger. The girl, he said finally, is about to learn that some people aren't what they appear to be. What Dante didn't expect was that he was about to learn the same lesson. Because falling in love with Isabella Rodriguez had never been part of his plan. The next morning, Isabella stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the simple white dress she'd chosen for her fake wedding. Her hands were shaking as she applied lipstick, trying to convince herself this wasn't the craziest thing she'd ever done. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. "Car is waiting downstairs. You sure about this?" Isabella typed back. "Too late to back out now." She grabbed her purse and headed downstairs, where Carmen was waiting in the lobby of Isabella's penthouse building. "You look beautiful," Carmen said, "like a real bride." "Don't," Isabella said quickly. "This is business, nothing more." "Right, business." Carmen's tone suggested she didn't entirely believe it. They drove to the address Isabella had given Dante, a small hotel in downtown Miami. Isabella had booked him a room so he could clean up and prepare for their courthouse wedding. "Are you nervous?" Carmen asked as they pulled up to the hotel. "Terrified," Isabella admitted. "I'm about to marry a complete stranger. A complete stranger who's about to make you very happy or very rich. Let's hope it's the first one." Isabella's breath caught when Dante emerged from the hotel lobby. The transformation was stunning. Gone was the disheveled homeless man from the street corner. In his place stood someone who looked like he'd stepped off the cover of a magazine. Dante wore a perfectly fitted navy suit that accentuated his tall frame. His dark hair was professionally styled, and he'd shaved to reveal a jawline that could cut glass. But it was his eyes that made Isabella's heart skip. Those piercing gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "Good morning," he said, sliding into the back seat beside Isabella. His voice was smoother now, more cultured than she remembered. "You look..." Isabella started, then stopped herself. "Professional." "Thank you, I aim to please." Carmen glanced at them in the rearview mirror with raised eyebrows. "Well, you two certainly look like a couple who could be getting married." The courthouse was busy with people handling various legal matters. Isabella and Dante joined the line for marriage licenses, standing close together like any other couple about to tie the knot. "Nervous?" Dante asked quietly. "Should I be?" "That depends on how good an actress you are." Isabella looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "We need to convince the clerk that this is real, that we're in love and eager to get married." Before Isabella could respond, Dante reached over and took her hand. His fingers were warm and strong, and when he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, Isabella felt electricity shoot up her arm. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Practicing," he said with a smile that made her knees weak. "Next." They stepped up to the clerk's window, Dante's arm around Isabella's waist. The contact felt surprisingly natural, like they'd been together for years instead of one day. "We'd like to apply for a marriage license," Dante said. "How long have you two been together?" the clerk asked, clearly required to make conversation while processing paperwork. 6 months, Isabella said at the same time Dante said. 8 months. They looked at each other, and Dante smiled. "It feels longer when you're in love." The clerk smiled back. "Aw, that's sweet. When's the big day?" "Today," Isabella said. "We can't wait any longer." "Young love," the clerk said approvingly. "Judge Martinez can perform the ceremony in 20 minutes if you're ready." "We're ready," Dante said, squeezing Isabella's hand. 20 minutes later, they stood in a small ceremony room with Carmen as their witness and Judge Martinez officiating. Isabella held a bouquet of white roses that Carmen had insisted on buying from the courthouse gift shop. "Do you, Isabella Rodriguez, take Dante Moreau to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Judge Martinez asked. Isabella looked into Dante's gray eyes. For a moment, she almost forgot this was fake. The way he was looking at her with such intensity and focus made her feel like she was the only person in the world. "I do," she said. "Do you, Dante Moreau, take Isabella Rodriguez to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Dante said, never taking his eyes off Isabella's face. "You may kiss the bride." Isabella's heart stopped. They hadn't discussed this part. Dante stepped closer, his hands coming up to cup her face gently. "Is this okay?" he whispered. Isabella nodded, not trusting her voice. When Dante's lips touched hers, Isabella felt the world disappear. The kiss was soft, gentle, but there was something underneath it that made her pulse race. When they broke apart, Isabella was breathless. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Moreau," Judge Martinez said with a smile. Mrs. Moreau. Isabella had a new last name, even if it was temporary. As they signed the marriage certificate, Isabella noticed Dante's signature was confident and elegant, not the hesitant scrawl she might have expected from someone in his circumstances. "So," Carmen said as they walked back to the car, "how does it feel to be married?" Isabella glanced at Dante, who was walking beside her with his hands in his pockets. "Surreal. What happens now?" Dante asked. "Now we go to my apartment and figure out our story," Isabella said. "My stepmother is expecting to meet my new husband at dinner tonight." Dante nodded. "What should I know about her?" "Patricia is difficult. She's been trying to undermine my position in the company since she married my father. She'll be looking for any reason to claim this marriage is fake. Then we better make sure she believes it's real." Isabella's penthouse apartment occupied the entire top floor of a luxury building with panoramic views of Miami's skyline. As the elevator opened directly into her living room, Dante stepped out and looked around with what appeared to be genuine appreciation. "This is beautiful," he said, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Thank you." Isabella set her purse down and tried to ignore how natural Dante looked in her space, like he belonged there. "So," she said, settling onto the white leather sofa, "we need to get our story straight before tonight." Dante sat beside her, close enough that Isabella could smell his cologne. Something expensive and masculine that made her want to lean closer. "How did we meet?" he asked. "At a coffee shop," Isabella said. "You were between jobs, and I was taking a break from work. We started talking. And I swept you off your feet with my charm and wit?" Isabella almost smiled. "Something like that. We've been seeing each other for 2 months. You moved in here last week. Moved fast." "When you know," Isabella said, echoing what he'd said at the courthouse. They spent the next hour creating their backstory, but Isabella found herself getting distracted by little things. The way Dante's eyes crinkled when he smiled. How he listened intently when she spoke, like her words actually mattered. The way he unconsciously straightened his tie when he was thinking. For someone who'd been living on the streets, he had remarkably good manners and seemed comfortable in luxury surroundings. "You're very good at this," Isabella said finally. "Good at what?" "Acting like you belong here. Most people would be intimidated by..." She gestured around the apartment. Dante was quiet for a moment. "I haven't always been homeless, Isabella. What happened? Bad investments, worse partnerships. Sometimes life doesn't go according to plan." There was something in his tone that suggested the subject was closed, so Isabella didn't push. "We should probably talk about physical boundaries," she said instead. "Physical boundaries? We're supposed to be married. Patricia will expect us to act like a couple in love. But I don't want you to think that means that the physical aspect of our arrangement extends beyond public appearances," Dante finished smoothly. "Exactly. Of course. Though we should probably practice." Isabella's heart skipped. "Practice what?" "Acting like we're comfortable with each other. The way I kissed you at the courthouse. That needs to look natural." Before Isabella could respond, Dante moved closer on the sofa. "May I?" Isabella nodded, not trusting her voice. Dante's hand came up to touch her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin. Isabella's eyes fluttered closed at the gentle contact. "We need to look like we can't keep our hands off each other," he said softly. When Isabella opened her eyes, Dante's face was inches from hers. This close, she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes and the faint scar above his left eyebrow. "How's this?" she whispered. "Perfect," he said, but he didn't move away. They stayed like that for a moment, breathing the same air, before Isabella's phone rang and broke the spell. "Patricia," Isabella said, checking the caller ID. She cleared her throat and answered. "Hello? Isabella, darling. I hope you're ready for tonight. I've invited a few additional guests." "What kind of guests?" "Business associates. People who knew your father. They're all dying to meet your mysterious new husband." Isabella's stomach clenched. How many people? Only 12. Nothing too overwhelming. 12 people who would be analyzing every word Dante said, looking for signs that their marriage was fake. "That's fine," Isabella said. "We'll see you at 7. After hanging up, Isabella looked at Dante with panic in her eyes. 12 people, all of them sharks who will smell blood in the water if we make one mistake. "Hey," Dante said, taking her hands. "We've got this. I won't let you down." Looking into his steady gray eyes, Isabella almost believed him. That evening, Isabella stood in front of her bedroom mirror, wearing a black cocktail dress and trying to calm her nerves. In 30 minutes, she would walk into Patricia's house with Dante and either save her inheritance or lose everything. A soft knock on her bedroom door made her turn. "Come in." Dante entered wearing a black suit that fit him like it was custom-made. He looked devastatingly handsome and completely at ease. "Ready?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." Dante walked over and stood behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "You look beautiful." "Thank you. You look..." Isabella paused. "You look perfect. Like you were born to wear clothes like that." Something flickered across Dante's reflection, but it was gone before Isabella could identify it. "Just good genes," he said lightly. They drove to Patricia's house in comfortable silence, but Isabella's nerves increased with every mile. Patricia lived in a massive estate in Coral Gables, the kind of house that was designed to intimidate. "Remember," Isabella said as they pulled into the circular driveway, "we're madly in love. We can't keep our hands off each other, and if anyone asks difficult questions..." "Let me handle it," Dante said confidently. The front door opened as they approached, revealing Patricia in a form-fitting red dress that screamed expensive. She was in her early 50s but looked younger, thanks to excellent plastic surgery and personal trainers. "Isabella," Patricia said with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And this must be the famous Dante." "Mrs. Rodriguez," Dante said, taking Patricia's hand and kissing it gently. "Thank you for having us. Isabella has told me so much about you." "All good, I hope," Patricia said, but her eyes were already analyzing Dante like a predator sizing up prey. The living room was full of people Isabella recognized. Business associates, family friends, board members from Rodriguez Industries. All of them turned to stare when she and Dante entered. "Everyone," Patricia announced, "I'd like you to meet Isabella's new husband, Dante Moreau." A murmur went through the room. Isabella felt Dante's hand tighten slightly on hers. "Dante, darling, tell us about yourself," said Margaret Wellington, one of her father's oldest business partners. "What do you do?" "I'm in consulting," Dante replied smoothly. "Corporate restructuring, primarily." "How interesting. Which firm?" "I'm independent. I work with various clients on acquisitions and mergers. Isabella held her breath, waiting for someone to ask for specifics, but Margaret just nodded approvingly. "And how did you two meet?" asked another voice. "Coffee shop," Isabella said. "I was having a terrible day and Dante made me laugh." "Love at first sight?" Patricia asked with obvious skepticism. Dante looked down at Isabella with such genuine warmth that even Isabella almost believed it was real. "For me, absolutely," he said. "Isabella is extraordinary." "How romantic," Patricia said dryly. "And the wedding was quite sudden, wasn't it?" "When you know," Isabella said. "Indeed. Though I'm surprised you didn't want a proper ceremony. Your father always dreamed of walking you down the aisle at St. Mary's Cathedral." Isabella felt the familiar stab of pain at the mention of her father. "We wanted something simple, intimate." "Well," Patricia said, "I suppose we'll have to throw you a proper reception. Let everyone celebrate properly." Before Isabella could respond, a newcomer entered the living room. Isabella's blood ran cold when she recognized the man. James Crawford, the most ruthless corporate lawyer in Miami and someone who specialized in exposing fraud. "James," Patricia said brightly. "Perfect timing. I was just telling Isabella we should have a proper celebration for her marriage." James looked at Dante with sharp, assessing eyes. "Congratulations," he said, but his tone suggested anything but celebration. "Thank you," Dante replied calmly. "Dante Moreau," James said thoughtfully. "The name sounds familiar. Have we met?" Isabella felt her heart stop. This was it. They were about to be exposed, but Dante just smiled. "I don't think so, though I suppose all consultants start to look alike after a while." James studied Dante for another moment, then nodded. "Perhaps you're right." The conversation moved on, but Isabella noticed that James kept watching Dante throughout the evening. Every question Dante answered smoothly, every story he told convincingly, but James's expression grew more suspicious. Finally, after what felt like hours, the party began to wind down. Isabella and Dante were saying their goodbyes when Patricia pulled Isabella aside. "He's very charming," Patricia said. "Thank you. Almost too charming, too smooth, too perfect." Isabella's stomach clenched. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if this marriage is some sort of arrangement designed to circumvent your father's will, I will find out. It's not an arrangement. I love him." Patricia smiled coldly. "We'll see." As they drove home, Isabella's hands were shaking. "That was close," she said. "James Crawford is dangerous. If he starts investigating—" "He won't find anything," Dante said confidently. "How can you be so sure?" Dante was quiet for a moment. "Because I'm very good at covering my tracks." Something in his tone made Isabella look at him more closely, but his expression was unreadable in the dim light of the car. Back at Isabella's apartment, they stood in the living room, the evening's tension still hanging between them. "You were amazing tonight," Isabella said. "I couldn't have pulled that off without you. We make a good team." Isabella looked at Dante, her husband, at least on paper, and felt a flutter of something that had nothing to do with their business arrangement. "Dante," she said softly. "Yes?" "Thank you for everything." Dante stepped closer, his gray eyes intense. "Isabella." "Yes." "This is probably a mistake," he said, but his hand came up to cup her cheek. "Probably," she agreed, but she didn't step away. When Dante kissed her this time, it wasn't for show. It was slow, deep, and full of the tension that had been building between them all day. Isabella melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "That was—" Isabella started. "A mistake," Dante finished, but he didn't sound like he regretted it. A big mistake, Isabella agreed. Should we do it again? Instead of answering, Isabella pulled him down for another kiss. What neither of them knew was that across town, James Crawford was sitting in his office, running background checks on Dante Moreau. And what he was about to discover would change everything. Drop a fire emoji if you're dying to know what James Crawford discovers about Dante. Hit that subscribe button because the next part will reveal secrets that will blow your mind. This fake marriage is about to become very, very real. But will it survive the truth?